Hello and welcome. The name itself carries weight, a syllable that seems to drain warmth from the air when spoken aloud. Vecna. You have heard it whispered in taverns, seen it scrawled in forbidden texts, felt the chill that accompanies its utterance. But names, even terrible ones, begin somewhere. They are earned through deeds that echo across centuries, carved into reality by actions so profound that time itself cannot erase them. What you are about to discover goes beyond simple tales of conquest or typical ascensions to power. This is the story of how mortality itself became insufficient, how one being's hunger for knowledge and dominion rewrote the very rules of existence. Long before Vecna became the Whispered One, before his name inspired dread across 1,000 worlds, he walked as flesh and blood upon the soil of Oerth. The exact details of his birth remain shrouded, though what scholars have pieced together paints a picture of a child born into circumstances that would forge him into something terrible. He was born in the city of Fleeth, part of the untouchable caste, the lowest rung of society where magic was strictly forbidden to those of his station. His mother, Mazel, was a hedge witch who practiced the arcane arts despite the prohibitions placed upon their caste. She taught young Vecna what she knew of witchcraft, passing down knowledge that was considered illegal for people of their social standing. The authorities of Fleeth discovered Mazel's practices. She was executed by the government for the crime of practicing unsanctioned magic, forbidden to the untouchables. This event, the loss of his mother to those who would deny him knowledge based solely on the circumstances of his birth, appears to have planted seeds of rage and ambition that would define everything that followed. Based on what we know of Vecna's later actions, we can infer that this injustice became the catalyst for his obsession with power and his eventual vow to destroy the very city that had taken his mother from him. You must understand that genius, true genius, is not merely intelligence. It is an obsession, a hunger that cannot be satisfied, a need that drives one forward even when all reason demands retreat. Vecna possessed this in measures that would have destroyed lesser minds. While other children learned their letters and numbers, he was already dissecting the fundamental principles of magic, understanding not just how to cast spells, but why they worked, what invisible threads connected the material world to the planes beyond. His natural aptitude for magic exceeded any normal bounds. Historical accounts suggest that his intelligence impressed even those above his station, with some versions of his history indicating that a king named Galithonian took interest in the young man's abilities and provided him with further training in courtly arts and deeper magical knowledge. The young man who would become Vecna did not simply study magic. He lived it, breathed it, allowed it to seep into every aspect of his being. Where others saw limits, he saw challenges to overcome. Where others accepted that certain knowledge was forbidden or lost, he saw only obstacles to be circumvented. This drive, This absolute refusal to accept any boundary would shape everything that followed. You can trace a direct line from that ambitious youth to the horror he would eventually become. Each step logical, each choice inevitable for someone who valued knowledge and power above all else. His early conquests were not military in the traditional sense. Vecna built his initial power base through manipulation, through the careful cultivation of secrets and the strategic revelation of them. He understood something fundamental about power that many overlook. Information is more valuable than armies, and fear is more effective than force. He began to gather followers not through charisma or promises of wealth, but through the simple demonstration that he knew things others did not, that he could do things others could not, and that opposing him was far more dangerous than serving him. The formation of what would become the occluded empire happened gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. A village here, a town there, each one brought under his influence through different means. Some he conquered through magical might, devastating their defenses with spells that had never been seen before. Others he subverted from within, placing his agents in positions of power, his cultists in positions of influence, until the entire structure answered to him without ever realizing it had changed hands. Still others came to him willingly, drawn by promises of knowledge, of power, of secrets that had been hidden since the dawn of civilization. Vecna's empire grew in the Flannies, that great eastern portion of the continent of Oerik on the world of Oerth. This was not some crude barbarian conquest or simple military expansion. This was a calculated, methodical absorption of territory and peoples, each acquisition chosen for strategic value, each conquest planned with the precision of a master chess player who can see dozens of moves ahead. His empire expanded from Perrinland across the plains to the extent of the Barrens, and across the Nerdiv, as far south as the Woolly Bay. His capital's exact location has been lost, or perhaps exists, now only in fragmented demiplane echoes. Though this could suggest he deliberately obscured its location, even in historical records. Within his empire, Vecna established himself not merely as a ruler, but as an absolute authority on all matters arcane. He built great libraries, vast repositories of knowledge gathered from across the world and beyond. But these were not public institutions. Access to knowledge in Vecna's domain was a privilege granted only to those who proved themselves worthy, and worthiness was determined by a single criterion: usefulness to Vecna himself. Those who served him well might be granted access to secrets that could elevate them beyond their peers. Those who failed him, or worse, betrayed him, found that knowledge could be a weapon turned against them with devastating efficiency. The turning point in Vecna's mortal existence came from his research into life and death. That boundary, which had fascinated and frustrated mages since the first spell was ever cast. Death represented the ultimate limit, the one barrier that even the most powerful magic could not permanently overcome. Oh, certainly, there were spells of resurrection, methods to call back the departed, but these were imperfect, dependent on divine intervention, subject to the whims of gods and the cooperation of souls. Vecna sought something different, a way to circumvent death entirely, to exist beyond its reach while maintaining his power and consciousness intact. The path to Lichhood is not a simple one. It requires more than mere magical knowledge, though that is essential. According to the lore, Vecna learned the ritual to become a Lich from Orcus, the demon prince of undeath himself. This transaction, a mortal bargaining with one of the most powerful entities of the abyss, speaks to the lengths Vecna was willing to go to achieve his goals. The ritual Orcus taught him involved components so vile and sacrifices so profound that even speaking of them is dangerous. Based on later accounts, we can infer that Vecna resented having to bargain with Orcus for this knowledge, which may explain why he later worked to refine and document the process himself, ensuring he would not remain beholden to the demon prince. The transformation to Lichhood demands a fundamental alteration of one's very nature, a willing corruption of the soul itself. You must understand what this means. To become a Lich is to voluntarily excise your own humanity, to hollow out everything that makes you mortal and fill that void with magic and malice. It requires rituals so dark that even speaking of them is dangerous, sacrifices so profound that they stain reality itself. Most who attempt the transformation fail, their souls destroyed, their bodies reduced to animated husks with no true consciousness remaining. But Vecna did not fail. He became the first mortal, or one of the first, to successfully achieve Lichhood. The exact nature of Vecna's transformation has never been fully revealed, and perhaps that is for the best. What is known is that he succeeded where countless others had fallen short. He became something more than mortal, something less than alive, something that existed in the space between those states. His body, once flesh and blood, became a vessel for pure magical energy, held together by will and dark sorcery. His soul, rather than departing for whatever afterlife might have claimed it, was bound to a phylactery, a receptacle of immense magical power that would ensure his consciousness could never truly be destroyed. As a Lich, Vecna's power increased exponentially. The limitations of mortal flesh no longer bound him. He required no sleep, no food, no rest. Every moment could be devoted to study, to planning, to the expansion of his knowledge and his empire. Time itself became his ally rather than his enemy. Where mortal wizards might spend decades mastering a particular school of magic, Vecna had centuries to perfect his craft, millennia if he desired. Death, which had been the great equalizer, the force that ultimately claimed even the mightiest of sorcerers, no longer had any claim on him. But Lichhood brought changes beyond mere immortality. The transformation altered Vecna's perception of the world, his relationship to other beings. Mortals became tools resources to be used and discarded as necessity demanded. Their lives, which seemed so precious to them, were merely brief flickers in his eternal existence. Compassion, empathy, mercy, these emotions that had perhaps once resided in his mortal heart withered and died, replaced by cold calculation and an ever-growing hunger for knowledge and control. His empire expanded with renewed vigor. Where before his conquests had been methodical and patient, they now took on an inevitable quality. Cities that resisted found themselves facing a being who could outlast any siege, who could return from any defeat, who possessed magical might beyond anything they had encountered. His armies, increasingly composed of undead servitors, who required no food or payment, and who followed orders with absolute precision, swept across the land. His network of spies and informants grew to encompass entire nations, feeding him information that he processed with inhuman efficiency. He vowed to destroy the elven kingdoms that acted to restrain his reign of terror. The war against the elves would rage for 400 years, with Vecna destroying all but 5 of the elven cities in the Griff Mountains. This prolonged conflict demonstrates both his patience and his ruthlessness, a willingness to pursue vengeance and conquest across centuries without wavering. It was during this period of expansion that Vecna took on a lieutenant, a warrior of exceptional skill and ruthless efficiency named Kaz. The relationship between Vecna and Kaz has been the subject of countless scholarly debates, but what cannot be disputed is that Kaz was more than merely another servant. He became Vecna's right hand, his most trusted enforcer, the physical might to complement Vecna's magical power. Vecna, for all his arcane mastery, was still fundamentally a wizard, his body frail even in undeath. Kaz provided the martial prowess that allowed Vecna's will to be enforced with brutal efficiency. Some accounts describe Kaz as a vampire, others simply as an exceptionally skilled mortal warrior, but all agree on his effectiveness and brutality in service to his master. The partnership proved devastatingly effective. While Vecna plotted and planned from his throne, weaving schemes that spanned decades, Kaz led the armies that conquered in his name. Kaz the Bloody-Handed, as he came to be known, was a warrior of legendary skill, capable of cutting through enemy ranks like a scythe through wheat. Under his command, Vecna's forces became an unstoppable tide, and the empire grew to encompass vast territories. Kaz served as regent over many of the kingdoms and cults that Vecna established. But empires built on fear and the threat of undead horrors carry within them the seeds of their own destruction. The people who lived under Vecna's rule did not love him, they feared him. Fear is a powerful tool for control, but it is not loyalty. Given the opportunity, given the slightest hope of freedom, people will rise against even the most seemingly invincible tyrant. And within Vecna's own inner circle, seeds of discontent were growing. Vecna, in what would prove to be a catastrophic miscalculation, crafted for Ka's a sword. This weapon, infused with dark magic and intended as a symbol of Ka's authority and a reward for his loyal service, was a blade of incredible power that could cut through magical protections and armor as if they were not there. This sword, which would come to bear Ka's name, was meant to represent Vecna's favor and trust. But powerful artifacts have wills of their own, and the sword of Ka's, whispered to its wielder, fed his ambitions, nurtured his resentments. The texts of the old masters remain unclear whether the sword was already sentient when Vecna created it, or whether it became magically linked to Ka's soul over time. But the effect was the same. The sword corrupted Ka's, convincing him that he was greater than Vecna and deserving of all the spoils of war they had both accomplished. The historical records of what happened next are fragmentary, pieced together from surviving texts and the testimony of those few who witnessed the events from a distance. What is certain is that Ka's, whether through his own ambition, the sword's corruption, or some combination of both, turned against his master. The betrayal was not a simple assassination attempt. It was a full confrontation between two beings of immense power, a battle that shook the foundations of Vecna's citadel and sent shockwaves across the empire. The clash between Vecna and Ka's was apocalyptic in its scale. The battle raged through the halls of Vecna's fortress, each combatant landing blows that would have killed lesser beings. Instantly, Vecna's spells, any one of which could level a city, crashed against Ka's supernatural defenses. Ka's blade, empowered by hatred and dark magic, carved through Vecna's magical protections. Legends suggest that during the Siege of Fleeth, before his transformation to Lichhood, Vecna had been nearly slain by clerics of Foltest channeling divine light, which struck him primarily on his left side. This could imply a vulnerability that Ka's exploited. Or perhaps the left side held symbolic significance in the final confrontation. The end result was catastrophic for both combatants. Ka's, in his fury and desperation, managed to strike blows that severed Vecna's left hand and destroyed his left eye. These were not mere physical injuries. For a being of Vecna's nature, these were profound losses, pieces of his very essence torn away. But Vecna was not defeated. The confrontation destroyed Vecna's dark tower, reducing it to dust, though no one witnessed the actual conclusion of the battle. The explosion of magical energy that resulted sent shockwaves that could be felt for hundreds of miles. When the dust settled and the magical energies finally dissipated, both Vecna and Ka's were gone. The Empire, deprived of its master and his greatest general, collapsed into chaos. But Vecna, as you will discover, is not so easily destroyed. His phylactery remained intact, hidden somewhere beyond the reach of those who might seek to destroy it. His hand and eye, severed in the battle, but infused with his power, survived as artifacts of terrible potency. And his consciousness, his accumulated knowledge and malice and hunger, endured. The betrayal by Kaz marked the end of Vecna's physical empire, but the beginning of something perhaps even more dangerous. A Vecna who ruled from a throne could be located, could be opposed by armies and alliances. But a Vecna reduced to fragments, scattered across the multiverse, influencing events from the shadows, that was a far more insidious threat, one that would prove far harder to counter. The Lich, who had conquered nations through military might, would learn to conquer reality itself through patience, manipulation, and the careful exploitation of mortal ambitions. Section 2: Betrayal and Fragmentation. The aftermath of the battle left a vacuum that threatened to consume everything Vecna had built. His generals, his administrators, his carefully cultivated network of spies and sorcerers, all found themselves suddenly without the guiding will that had held the empire together. Some attempted to seize power for themselves, sparking civil wars that would rage for years. Others simply fled, taking what treasures they could carry and disappearing into the wilderness. Still others, the truly devoted, the ones who had pledged themselves to Vecna not out of fear, but genuine worship, began searching for any sign that their master might return. They did not search in vain. You see, the nature of Lichhood is such that physical destruction is merely an inconvenience, not an ending. As long as the phylactery remains intact and hidden, the Lich can reform, can rebuild, can return. Vecna's phylactery had been hidden with such care, protected by such layers of misdirection and deadly traps, that even Kaz in his moment of rebellion had been unable to locate it. The exact location has never been discovered, and perhaps that is intentional. Some scholars theorize it exists in a demiplane accessible only through specific rituals. Others suggest it was hidden in plain sight, disguised as an innocuous object in some forgotten corner of the world. The fact that Vecna has survived multiple apparent destructions over millennia suggests his phylactery was hidden with unprecedented skill and foresight. What is known is that Vecna did not immediately reform after his apparent destruction. Whether this was by choice, allowing time for the chaos to settle and for his enemies to grow complacent, or whether the damage inflicted by Kaz required extensive time to heal, remains a matter of debate. But during this period of absence, something extraordinary occurred. The hand and eye that had been severed from Vecna's body did not simply decay or lose their power. Instead, they transformed into artifacts, items of such potent magic that they would influence events across the multiverse for millennia to come. The hand of Vecna appears as a desiccated, mummified left hand, its fingers curled as if grasping for something just beyond reach. The skin has the texture of old leather, stretched taut over bones that seem too large, too angular to have ever belonged to a natural creature. To those sensitive to magic, the hand radiates power that is almost overwhelming, a presence that seems to warp reality in its immediate vicinity. But the true horror of the hand of Vecna is not in its appearance, but in its function. To claim the hand's power, one must first sever their own left hand, a willing sacrifice that demonstrates commitment and opens the pathway for the artifact to bond with its new bearer. The process is agonizing beyond description. As the artifact grafts itself to the stump, it does not simply attach physically. The hand becomes part of them in a way that transcends mere physical attachment. Once bonded, the hand of Vecna grants its bearer access to powers that would normally require decades of study and practice. The hand grants strength far beyond natural limits, can cast powerful spells, and allows the bearer to use it for casting even if they normally could not perform somatic components. But these gifts come with a price that few fully comprehend when they make the choice to claim the artifact. The hand is not merely an object. Based on centuries of documented cases, we can infer that it carries within it a fragment of Vecna's consciousness, influencing its bearer in subtle ways that serve the Lich god's agenda. The eye of Vecna presents similar dangers, though its nature is somewhat different. The eye appears as a preserved orb, and to claim, it requires the removal of one's own left eye. Another willing mutilation that opens the pathway for the artifact to integrate with its new host. Once bonded, the eye grants vision that extends beyond normal sight, including true sight that can perceive through illusions and magical darkness. It can view distant locations and grants advantage on certain checks related to perception and investigation. But like the hand, the eye carries more than just power. Historical accounts suggest it serves as a window through which Vecna himself can observe the world, gathering information, watching events unfold, identifying opportunities for manipulation. Bearers of the eye often report feeling watched, even when alone, a sensation of being observed by something vast and malevolent that lurks just beyond perception. Throughout history, both artifacts have passed through many hands, and the pattern that emerges is troubling. Those who claim the hand or eye almost invariably suffer tragic fates. Some are consumed by ambition, their personalities gradually eroded. Others are destroyed by enemies who seek the artifacts for themselves, creating an endless cycle of violence and betrayal. The documented history of these artifacts shows a trail of corruption and death spanning centuries. The most dangerous scenario occurs when a single individual claims both the hand and the eye. The combined power of both artifacts is immense, though the mechanics of how they interact when worn together remain deliberately vague in historical records. This could imply that Vecna himself ensures such knowledge remains obscured, as bearers of both artifacts might represent either useful pawns or potential threats, depending on circumstances. The artifacts do not remain in one place long. Their history is a trail of violence and ambition across the ages, passing from ruler to adventurer to dark sorcerer, each believing they can control the power each ultimately serving as pawns in Vecna's larger game. The hand and eye have appeared in countless conflicts, influenced the outcomes of wars, toppled kingdoms, and elevated tyrants. And through it all, Vecna's influence spreads. His knowledge of the world grows. His plans advance incrementally toward goals that only he fully comprehends, while the artifacts wandered the material plane, changing hands and corrupting bearers. Vecna himself underwent a transformation of a different sort. His physical form, though destroyed in the battle with Kaz, was not his only presence in the multiverse. Through his long existence, Vecna had accumulated knowledge that transcended physical boundaries, established connections to other planes, created contingencies that would ensure his survival even in the most catastrophic circumstances. His followers, those who had pledged themselves to him in life and continued to serve him in his absence, became the living vessels of his legacy. The cult of Vecna transformed from a state religion enforced through fear into something more insidious, a secret society that existed in the shadows of civilizations across multiple worlds. These cultists gathered in hidden temples, performed dark rituals in forgotten places, and worked tirelessly to prepare for their master's eventual return. The cult structure was, and remains, deliberately fragmented. Individual cells operate with limited knowledge of the broader organization, communicating through coded messages and intermediaries, meeting only when necessary for specific rituals or operations. This decentralization serves multiple purposes. It makes the cult extremely difficult to eradicate, as destroying one cell does little to impact the others. It also protects the higher levels of the organization, the inner circle of priests and sorcerers who maintain direct communication with Vecna himself, from exposure and elimination. These high priests serve as conduits for Vecna's will, receiving visions and instructions that guide the cult's activities. They are chosen not merely for their devotion, but for their competence, their ability to interpret cryptic guidance and translate it into actionable plans. Many are accomplished wizards in their own right, though their power pales in comparison to their masters. They study the same paths Vecna once walked, seeking to emulate his achievements while remaining forever in his shadow. The cult's activities vary depending on location and opportunity, but certain patterns emerge. They seek out ancient knowledge, particularly texts and artifacts related to lichhood, necromancy, and the manipulation of planar boundaries. They infiltrate positions of power, placing cultists in roles where they can influence events while remaining above suspicion. They identify individuals with potential for corruption, those whose ambition or desperation makes them vulnerable to offers of forbidden knowledge or dark power, and they spread the worship of Vecna, ensuring that his name continues to be spoken. That fear of his return continues to grow. But the cult does more than simply prepare for Vecna's return. They actively work to bring it about. Through their rituals, They maintain connections to wherever Vecna's consciousness resides, channeling power to him, providing him with information about the current state of the multiverse, serving as his eyes and ears across countless worlds. Each ritual, each sacrifice, each act performed in Vecna's name strengthens him incrementally, pulling him closer to full manifestation. The process of Vecna's reformation was gradual, occurring over centuries rather than years or decades. His consciousness, scattered by the catastrophic energies unleashed in his battle with Cause, slowly coalesced, drawn together by the power of his phylactery and the devotion of his followers. The exact timeline of his reformation varies across different accounts, but what remains consistent is that he eventually returned to physical form. His power diminished from its height, but his knowledge and cunning intact. This period of apparent absence became a source of strength. Freed from immediate threats and the demands of maintaining a physical empire, Vecna could focus entirely on accumulation of knowledge and understanding. He observed events across multiple planes, witnessing the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of gods, the endless cycle of creation and destruction that defines reality. He studied the fundamental laws that govern existence itself, seeking weaknesses, loopholes, ways to exploit the underlying framework of the multiverse. During this time, Vecna also began to understand something crucial about power and its nature. Physical might, magical prowess, these things were important, but ultimately limited. True power, lasting power, came from influence, from the ability to shape events without direct intervention, to guide the course of history through careful manipulation rather than overt action. This realization would shape everything that followed. His influence spread through knowledge. Vecna understood that information is the most infectious force in existence. A single piece of forbidden lore, properly placed, could corrupt an entire society. A crucial secret, revealed at the right moment, could topple kingdoms. And so he ensured that his knowledge proliferated, that texts attributed to him or his followers found their way into libraries and private collections across the plains. These were not crude manuals of evil, but sophisticated treatises on magic and metaphysics. Volumes that appeared to offer genuine insight and power, while subtly guiding their readers toward philosophies that served Vecna's interests. The most insidious aspect of this approach was its effectiveness. A mage studying from a text of Vecnan origin might never consciously serve the Lich god, might even oppose him if confronted directly, yet still advance his agenda through the very nature of the magic they practiced, the spells they learned, the theories they embraced, the worldview they adopted, all of it carefully crafted to spread Vecna's influence like a virus through the arcane community. Vecna also began to experiment with the nature of mortality and divinity. He had achieved lichhood, had transcended death in a way that most could only dream of. But he observed the gods themselves, beings of immense power who existed across multiple planes simultaneously, who could influence reality through the faith of their followers, who were in many ways ideas given form and will. And he began to wonder, if a mortal could become a lich, if death could be overcome through magic and will, then could a lich become something greater still? Could one ascend to divinity itself, not through the favor of existing gods, but through sheer force of will and accumulated power? This question would drive much of Vecna's activity in the centuries to come. He began experimenting with the nature of worship, establishing himself as an object of religious devotion among his cultists. He studied the mechanisms by which divine power functioned, seeking to understand how belief translated into tangible force. He explored the boundaries between the planes, looking for weaknesses in the barriers that separated the material world from the divine realms. Throughout all of this, cause remained as both warning and motivation. Somewhere in the multiverse, the betrayer existed, transformed by his battle with Vecna into something neither fully alive nor properly undead. Vecna could sense him at times, based on the sympathetic connection forged through years of service and the sword that still bound them. Kaz had become a lich himself, though the circumstances of his transformation differed from Vecna's, where Vecna had embraced undeath willingly. Kaz had been forced into it by the catastrophic energies unleashed in their final confrontation. The sword that had enabled Kaz's betrayal remained with him, forever binding them together. Through the sword, accounts suggest Vecna could occasionally catch glimpses of his former lieutenant's activities, but Vecna did not immediately seek revenge. Instead, he viewed Kaz as a useful tool, a cautionary example of the price of betrayal, a reminder to his followers of what awaited those who turned against him. The time for reckoning would come eventually, but Vecna had learned patience. The fragmentation that resulted from his battle with Kaz, rather than weakening Vecna, had ultimately made him stronger in ways that would only become apparent over time. His influence was no longer concentrated in a single location that could be besieged or destroyed. His power was distributed across artifacts, cultists, texts, and rituals scattered throughout the multiverse. Destroying him would require tracking down every fragment, eliminating every cultist, burning every text, a task so monumental that it bordered on impossible. And so Vecna persisted, patient and relentless, working toward goals that only he fully understood, building toward a destiny that would shake the foundations of the multiverse itself. The Whispered One had learned that sometimes the most profound changes come not through grand gestures, but through quiet accumulation, through influence that spreads like roots beneath the surface, invisible until the moment it breaks through ground and reveals how deeply it has penetrated. Section 3. The Undying Hierarchy. The nature of undeath exists on a spectrum far more complex than most mortals comprehend. At one end lie simple animated corpses, mindless shells that follow basic commands with no will or consciousness of their own. At the other end exist beings like Vecna, entities of such power and sophistication that they transcend the very categories meant to define them. Understanding where Vecna fits within this hierarchy requires understanding the hierarchy itself, the layers of existence between life and true death. When a necromancer animates a corpse, they are not restoring life, but imposing will upon dead matter. The resulting zombie or skeleton possesses no thoughts, no desires, no sense of self. It is a puppet, nothing more, animated by external magical force rather than any internal spark. These creatures serve a purpose, forming the lowest ranks of undead armies, performing tasks too menial or dangerous for living servants. But they are tools, not beings, and destroying them eliminates a resource without impacting any consciousness that might grieve the loss or seek revenge. Moving up the hierarchy, you encounter undead that retain some measure of their former identity. Ghouls and ghasts, for instance, maintain a twisted parody of intelligence, driven by insatiable hunger, but capable of cunning and even basic problem-solving. Wights and wraiths possess clearer memories of their former lives, though these memories are filtered through the lens of undeath, transformed into sources of bitterness and rage rather than nostalgia or regret. These beings exist in a state of eternal frustration, aware enough to remember what they lost, but incapable of experiencing it again. Higher still are the incorporeal undead, spirits that have rejected or been denied passage to their final rest. Specters and banshees retain strong connections to their former identities, often haunting locations significant to their mortal lives, driven by unfinished business or overwhelming emotions that survived the transition from life to death. These entities pose greater threats than their lesser cousins, as they cannot be destroyed through simple physical violence, and often possess abilities that allow them to drain life force or induce terror in those who encounter them. But even these powerful spirits pale in comparison to the Liches, beings who have deliberately transformed themselves through arcane rituals, who chose undeath as a path to power, rather than having it imposed upon them through necromantic magic or spiritual tragedy. A Lich is fundamentally different from other undead because the transformation is voluntary, calculated, and most importantly, involves the creation of a phylactery, an object that contains and protects the Lich's life force. The phylactery represents the key difference between a Lich and all other forms of undead. Where a vampire might be destroyed by exposing it to sunlight or driving a stake through its heart, where a wraith might be banished through divine magic or specific rituals, a Lich can only be permanently destroyed by locating and eliminating its phylactery. The body, even if utterly annihilated, will eventually reform, drawing upon the power stored within the phylactery. This makes liches extraordinarily difficult to eliminate, as the phylactery can be hidden anywhere in the multiverse, protected by layers of magical defenses, traps, and misdirection. Creating a phylactery requires knowledge that most wizards never acquire and sacrifices that most would refuse to make even if they possessed that knowledge. Vecna himself learned the ritual from Orcus, the demon prince of undeath, becoming one of the first mortals to achieve lichhood through this terrible transformation. The phylactery must be an object prepared through rituals that involve the sacrifice of sentient lives. And the final transformation requires the wizard to die. To cross that threshold between life and death, while maintaining enough will and magical power to bind their departing soul to the prepared phylactery, rather than allowing it to proceed to whatever afterlife might claim it. The moment of transformation is described by those few who have witnessed it as reality itself recoiling. The laws of nature are being violated in a fundamental way. Life becoming death, becoming something else entirely. Something that should not exist, but does through sheer magical force and will. The new Lich rises with power that exceeds what they possessed in life, but they also rise changed in ways that cannot be easily quantified. Emotions that drove them as mortals become muted or twisted. Compassion transforms into calculation. Love becomes obsession. Ambition, always a driving force for those who pursue lichhood, metastasizes into an all-consuming hunger for power and knowledge that can never be satisfied. Among liches themselves, a hierarchy exists based on power, knowledge, and age. Newly created liches, while formidable compared to mortal wizards, must learn to manage their new condition, to control the impulses that come with undeath, to navigate the complex relationships between different undead factions and powers. Many fail in these early stages, either destroying themselves through careless use of their new abilities, or being eliminated by rivals who view them as potential threats or useful resources. Those liches who survive their first century begin to accumulate genuine power. They establish lairs fortified with magical defenses, gather minions both living and undead to serve their purposes, and begin pursuing the long-term projects that immortality makes possible. These established liches form a loose network across the planes, sometimes cooperating when their interests align, more often competing for resources, territory, and arcane secrets. At the apex of this hierarchy stand the ancient liches, beings who have existed for millennia, who have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, who have accumulated knowledge and power that borders on the divine. These entities are rare, as few liches manage to survive the countless dangers and rivals they face over such extended periods. But those who do become forces of nature unto themselves, capable of reshaping reality through will and magic, feared and respected even by gods. Vecna occupies a unique position even among these ancient liches. His age alone would place him among the most powerful undead beings in existence. But his accomplishments extend far beyond mere longevity. Where other liches might focus on a single area of magical study or a specific goal, Vecna has pursued all knowledge, all forms of power, refusing to accept any limitation or boundary. His phylactery, hidden with such skill that millennia of searching have failed to reveal its location, represents a masterwork that other liches attempt to emulate without success. More significantly, Vecna transcended the traditional boundaries of lichhood itself through his eventual ascension to godhood. This transformation, which occurred through the events known as Vecna Lives and Die Vecna Die, elevated him beyond what any other lich had achieved before his apotheosis. His influence over other necromancers and undead beings came primarily through the spread of his knowledge and the fear his name inspired. His influence operates through the texts and teachings he has spread across the multiverse, the rituals for becoming a lich that circulate through arcane circles often trace their lineage back to the knowledge Vecna gained from Orcus, and then refined and documented. This suggests that many liches created using these methods follow processes that Vecna himself pioneered or modified, creating a kind of philosophical and magical lineage, even if not a direct supernatural bond. The spread of lichhood itself has been facilitated by Vecna's activities. Each new lich created using rituals derived from his research, even inadvertently, represents another being who has walked a path he helped pave. The texts that circulate, the theories that spread through academic circles, the very normalization of necromancy in some magical traditions, all bear traces of his influence. Beyond liches, Vecna's research into necromancy established him as one of the foremost authorities on animation, control, and manipulation of unliving beings. His experiments have produced insights that necromancers study centuries after they were first documented. The spells attributed to him, the techniques he pioneered, the philosophical frameworks he established for understanding undeath. All of these continue to shape how necromancy is practiced across multiple worlds. The knowledge that Vecna has accumulated regarding undeath goes far beyond simple creation and control. He understands the metaphysical principles underlying the condition, the ways in which negative energy interacts with the positive energy that sustains life. Based on the breadth of his documented research, we can infer that he has mapped connections between the material plane and the negative energy plane in unprecedented detail. Though the specifics of such discoveries remain closely guarded secrets, the texts attributed to Vecna form an extensive library of necromantic lore, ranging from basic primers suitable for novice wizards to advanced treatises that even experienced necromancers struggle to comprehend. These works circulate through both legitimate and underground channels, copied and recopied until their origins become obscured. A wizard purchasing a volume on necromancy from a reputable dealer might have no idea they are studying material originally penned by Vecna himself, filtered through generations of transcription, but retaining the core principles he established. This proliferation of knowledge serves multiple purposes. It ensures that necromancy remains a viable field of magical study, that new generations of wizards continue exploring undeath and its applications. It spreads his philosophical approach to magic, emphasizing the pursuit of power above ethical considerations, the treatment of life and death as resources to be manipulated rather than sacred states to be respected, and it creates a pool of potential recruits for his cult. As wizards who delve deeply into necromantic study often find themselves drawn to the source of that knowledge. The most dangerous aspect of Vecna's necromantic knowledge is not what he shares, but what he retains exclusively. The texts that circulate publicly represent merely the foundation, basic principles that any competent necromancer could eventually discover through dedicated study. The true secrets, the rituals and techniques that elevated Vecna above all other practitioners of the death arts, remain closely guarded, shared only with his most trusted servants, and even then, only partially. This creates a perpetual incentive for ambitious necromancers to seek closer association with Vecna's cult, always believing that the next secret, the next revelation, might be the one that grants them power comparable to his own. In reality, no amount of study can truly bridge that gap. Vecna's power stems not just from knowledge, but from millennia of experience, from perspective gained through observing the long patterns of history, from connections and contingencies established over countless generations. A mortal wizard, even one who becomes a lich, operates on a fundamentally different timescale, thinking in terms of years or decades, where Vecna thinks in centuries and millennia. This temporal advantage, combined with his accumulated resources and influence, makes him effectively impossible to surpass through conventional means. The undead hierarchy that exists across the multiverse includes entire societies and cultures. Kingdoms of undead exist, ruled by vampire lords or lich sovereigns, populated by various forms of unliving beings. The extent to which these kingdoms consciously serve Vecna varies, though his influence can be traced through shared magical traditions, similar governmental structures, or philosophical frameworks that echo his teachings. Some undead societies incorporate Vecna worship into their cultural practices, declaring themselves followers of the Whispered One. These tend to be newer kingdoms, or those founded by individuals who came to power with support from his cult. They pay tribute in the form of magical research, artifacts recovered from ruins, or services rendered when needed. In exchange, they receive access to knowledge that keeps them competitive with living nations. The hierarchy Vecna has influenced represents more than simple dominance over other undead beings. It is a system of influence that operates through the spread of knowledge, the proliferation of texts, and the establishment of magical traditions that shape how necromancy is understood and practiced. It is self-perpetuating, as each generation of necromancers studies texts derived from his teachings, and each new Lich created through his rituals adds another practitioner to the tradition he established. This influence continues to expand, growing more extensive and more deeply embedded in magical culture with each passing year. Section 4. The Path to Godhood. The transition from Lich to deity is not a natural progression. Undeath grants immortality, yes, and power beyond what most mortals can comprehend, but it does not confer divinity. Gods exist on a fundamentally different level of reality, drawing power from worship, able to manifest across multiple planes simultaneously, capable of granting spells to their followers and reshaping reality through divine will. For a Lich, even one as ancient and powerful as Vecna, the gap between what he was and what the gods represented seemed insurmountable. But Vecna had built his entire existence on refusing to accept limitations, on finding ways to accomplish what others deemed impossible. The first step in his ascension required understanding the nature of divinity itself. Vecna spent centuries studying gods, not through prayer or worship, but through clinical observation and analysis. He examined the mechanisms by which divine power functioned, tracked the flow of energy from worshippers to their deities, analyzed the ways in which belief translated into tangible force. He studied dead gods, those beings who had fallen from power, seeking to understand what had sustained them and what had led to their downfall. He investigated the boundaries between the divine realms and other planes, looking for patterns and principles that might be exploited. What he discovered was both encouraging and daunting. Divinity was not some inherent quality that certain beings possessed and others lacked. It was a state that could be achieved, a configuration of power and consciousness that existed in specific relationship to reality and to mortal belief. This meant that ascension was theoretically possible for any being who could accumulate sufficient power and worship. But it also meant that the process would be extraordinarily difficult, requiring resources and planning on a scale that few could manage. Vecna began laying groundwork for his ascension long before he had any concrete plan for achieving it. He understood that becoming a god would require vast amounts of worship, far more than his cult could provide. This meant expanding his influence, spreading his name and his fear across not just individual worlds, but entire crystal spheres, building a foundation of belief that could sustain divine consciousness. His cult received new directives, shifting from purely secretive operations to more public demonstrations of power and faith. Temples to Vecna began appearing in major cities, some operating openly, others hidden, but known to those who sought forbidden knowledge. The spread of Vecna's worship followed patterns he had carefully engineered. In some regions, his cult presented him as a god of secrets and knowledge, appealing to scholars and wizards who sought power through understanding. In others, he was worshipped as a deity of undeath and conquest, attracting those who viewed mortality as weakness and sought to transcend it. Still, other manifestations positioned him as a god of ambition itself, of the drive to exceed one's station and grasp power regardless of cost. These different aspects all fed the same entity, building his divine portfolio piece by piece. But worship alone would not suffice. The transition from Lich to God required a catalyst, a moment of transformation where accumulated power crystallized into something qualitatively different. Vecna studied historical instances of mortal ascension, the rare cases where individuals had achieved divinity through exceptional circumstances. Each case was unique, but patterns emerged: a concentration of power, a moment of crisis or opportunity, and most importantly, the belief of followers that their chosen figure deserved divine status. Vecna's opportunity came through a series of events that he had carefully orchestrated over centuries. His artifacts, the hand and eye, had continued their journey through history, corrupting bearers and spreading his influence. His cult had grown to encompass thousands of dedicated followers across multiple worlds. His knowledge had proliferated through countless texts and teachings. And most importantly, he had reformed his physical body, no longer existing as scattered consciousness, but manifesting as a complete entity of terrifying power. The adventure that mortals would later call Vecna lives began in the year 581 in the common year calendar of Oerth. This marked Vecna's return to physical form and his reemergence as an active threat to the world of Greyhawk. The module, published in the year 1990, detailed how Vecna had spent centuries rebuilding his power in secret, preparing for a return that would shake the foundations of the Flannies. During this adventure, Vecna manipulated events to gather power and resources necessary for his ultimate goal. He arranged for his artifacts to fall into specific hands, ensured that rumors of his activities circulated in ways that would draw both allies and enemies into positions useful to his plans. The adventure climaxed with Vecna's successful return, though heroes managed to thwart his immediate plans for domination. This suggests that even in apparent setbacks, Vecna achieved crucial objectives that would serve his longer-term strategy of achieving godhood. The events of Vecna Lives set the stage for something far more ambitious. For the next decade, Vecna worked toward his true goal, transcending lichhood entirely and achieving divinity. The culmination of these preparations came in an event that would be documented in the adventure module Die Vecna Die, published in the year 2000. Die Vecna Die represented not just another attempt at power, but a fundamental assault on the structure of the multiverse itself. Vecna had identified Sigil, that city at the center of all planes, as the perfect location for his final transformation. Sigil's unique properties, existing at the nexus of all realities, made it ideal for the type of reality-altering magic he needed to employ. The city's position allowed access to energies from across the multiverse, and its metaphysical significance meant that changes enacted there could ripple outward to affect all of existence. His plan involved nothing less than rewriting portions of reality itself, altering fundamental laws to create circumstances favorable to his ascension. The ritual required access to specific locations across multiple planes, each representing a nexus point where reality's framework was thinnest or most malleable. Based on the documented events, we can infer that Vecna sought not merely to become a god, but to reshape the multiverse so that his godhood became inevitable, so deeply woven into existence that removing him would require unmaking creation itself. The cult mobilized every resource for this final push. Armies of undead and living fanatics moved simultaneously across multiple worlds, seizing control of the nexus points Vecna required. High priests performed preparatory rituals, weakening barriers and channeling energies toward the locations where Vecna would manifest. Everything Vecna had built over millennia, every cult member, every scrap of knowledge, every fragment of influence, all converged on this singular moment. Heroes rose to oppose him once again, drawn by prophecies and divine visions warning of the catastrophe Vecna's success would bring. They fought through his armies, disrupted his rituals, destroyed artifacts crucial to his plans. The adventure took player characters from Greyhawk through Ravenloft, and ultimately to Sigil itself, where the final confrontation would determine the fate of the multiverse. The climax came in Sigil, where Vecna's activities threatened the very stability of the city, and by extension, all planes connected to it. The confrontation was so catastrophic that it drew the attention of the Lady of Pain herself, that mysterious entity who rules Sigil and tolerates no challenges to her authority. The Lady of Pain's intervention proved crucial, as even Vecna's accumulated power could not overcome her absolute dominion within her city. The resulting conflict occurred on a level that mortal minds struggle to comprehend. It was not a battle in any conventional sense, but a war of wills and competing visions of reality, each side attempting to assert their version as the truth that would persist. Vecna, for all his power and preparation, found himself facing opposition from multiple sources. The heroes who had pursued him, the gods who recognized the threat he represented, and ultimately the Lady of Pain herself. The outcome was both a victory and a defeat for all involved. Vecna's transformation was not prevented, but constrained. Instead of achieving the absolute godhood he sought, he was elevated to divine status, but one bounded by limitations that other deities faced. He gained a divine realm, the ability to grant spells to clerics, the capacity to manifest avatars across multiple planes. But he remained subject to certain fundamental rules governing divine existence. The adventure's resolution saw Vecna expelled from Sigil and elevated to the status of a lesser deity, a compromise that prevented his total domination, while acknowledging that he could not be completely stopped. For Vecna's enemies, this outcome represented both success and failure. They had prevented him from remaking reality according to his vision, had kept him from achieving the ultimate power he sought, but they had also failed to stop his ascension entirely, had allowed one of the most dangerous beings in existence to achieve godhood, even if in limited form. The compromised victory felt less like triumph and more like damage control, preventing a catastrophe rather than eliminating a threat. Vecna himself recognized the outcome for what it was: incomplete success. He had achieved divinity, yes, had transcended the limitations of lichhood and mortal existence, but the ascension had cost him more than he anticipated, bound him with restrictions he had hoped to avoid. The events of Die Vecna Die fundamentally changed the cosmology of the Dungeons and Dragons multiverse, as they served as the bridge between 2nd edition and 3rd edition rules, with the reality-shaking consequences of Vecna's near success, explaining certain changes in how the planes functioned going forward. Still, Vecna demonstrated the patience that had characterized his entire existence. Godhood, even constrained godhood, provided a foundation he could build upon. He had eternity to work toward removing the limitations imposed on him, to expand his divine power until it matched his ambitions. The transition from mortal wizard to lich had taken centuries. The journey from lich to deity had taken millennia. Based on this pattern, we can assume that Vecna views his current divine state as merely another stage in an ongoing evolution rather than a final destination. The multiverse had changed fundamentally with Vecna's ascension. A new god had entered the pantheon, one whose nature and goals differed radically from most divine beings. Where other gods valued their followers' faith and sought to inspire devotion, Vecna viewed worship as merely another resource to be exploited. Where other gods maintained some distinction between their divine portfolio and their personal ambitions, Vecna's godhood existed as an extension of the same hunger for power and knowledge that had driven him as a mortal. He was not a deity who had transcended his origins, but one who had carried them into divinity, fundamentally altering what it meant to be a god through his very presence in the pantheon. His divine portfolio, carved out through centuries of worship and crystallized in his apotheosis, reflects the nature he cultivated over his long existence. He holds dominion over secrets, knowledge particularly of the forbidden or hidden variety, magic with special emphasis on necromancy, and undeath itself. These domains make him uniquely dangerous, as nearly every sentient being engages with secrecy in some form. whether concealing their own information or seeking to uncover what others hide. This suggests that Vecna draws power from far more sources than most gods, as his portfolio encompasses activities that occur constantly across all civilizations. The events documented in Vecna Lives and Die Vecna Die represent canonical turning points in Dungeons and Dragons lore. Adventures that changed the fundamental nature of the game world. They demonstrated that even the most established rules could be challenged, that the boundaries between mortal and divine were not as fixed as previously believed. Vecna proved that a sufficiently powerful and patient being could achieve what should have been impossible, rewriting the rules of existence through accumulated knowledge, careful planning, and absolute refusal to accept limitation. The story of Vecna's ascension carries implications that extend beyond his individual achievement. It establishes that godhood is attainable through means other than traditional apotheosis, that a being can force their way into divinity rather than being elevated to it. This precedent troubles other gods, as it suggests their position is less secure than they might prefer to believe. If one Lich could become a god through will and magic, what prevents others from attempting the same? The answer, troublingly, is very little beyond the example of how difficult Vecna's path proved to be, and the reality that few possess his combination of knowledge, power, patience, and ruthless determination. Section 5. The Eternal Dominion. The transition from Lich to God altered Vecna in ways that extended beyond simple power increase. As a Lich, he had been bound by physical form, even if that form was undead and capable of reformation. As a god, he exists simultaneously across multiple planes. His consciousness distributed throughout reality in ways that make destroying him effectively impossible. His divine realm became an extension of his will, a space where his dominion is absolute, and reality conforms to his desires. This realm exists within the outer planes, though its exact location and nature remain subjects of theological debate among those who study divine geography. Based on accounts from clerics who claim to have received visions, we can infer that it appears as a place of shadows and secrets, where knowledge is both the greatest treasure and the most terrible burden. The architecture defies conventional understanding, reflecting the nature of a god whose very existence challenges the boundaries between life and death, between mortal and divine. Within this realm, Vecna maintains his accumulated knowledge. Every text he has ever read, every spell he has ever learned, every secret he has ever uncovered. These are not static repositories, but living extensions of his divine consciousness. To walk through such a place, if any mortal could survive the experience, would be to encounter knowledge as a physical force, pressing against consciousness, offering understanding at the cost of sanity. His divine portfolio reflects the nature he cultivated over millennia of undead existence. He is God of secrets first and foremost, holding dominion over all knowledge deliberately hidden, all truths concealed, all information withheld. This domain extends beyond simple confidentiality to encompass the very concept of hidden things. Anyone who conceals information for any reason performs an act that falls within Vecna's divine sphere of influence. However, unwittingly, this makes his portfolio extraordinarily broad, as secrecy is practiced by virtually every intelligent being across the multiverse. Magic, particularly necromancy, forms another core aspect of his divine nature. He is not the god of all magic, that portfolio being too vast and too contested by other powers. But undeath and the manipulation of negative energy belong to him more completely than to any other divine being. Every wizard who animates a corpse, every cleric who commands undead, every ritual that draws upon negative energy channels power that ultimately flows through Vecna's divine presence. He does not control these acts directly, but he is aware of them, can influence them subtly, and draws strength from their performance. His clergy operates differently from most divine organizations, where typical gods inspire devotion through love, hope, or aspirational ideals. Vecna's followers serve him through calculation and ambition. They do not worship him because they admire his virtues or seek to emulate his example in any moral sense. They serve because he offers power, because he provides access to knowledge others withhold, because he represents the ultimate expression of the principle that power justifies itself and needs no other validation. The clerics of Vecna come from diverse backgrounds, united only by their hunger for what he offers. Some are scholars who exhausted legitimate avenues of research and turned to forbidden sources. Others are wizards who seek the secrets of lichhood for themselves. Still others are simply ambitious individuals who recognize that conventional morality will not provide the power they seek and are willing to embrace whatever darkness necessary to achieve their goals. What they share is a fundamental willingness to sacrifice anything, including their own humanity, in pursuit of power and knowledge. These clerics can be found in nearly every major city across multiple worlds, sometimes operating openly from temples dedicated to the Whispered One, more often concealed within society. Posing as scholars, advisors, merchants, or officials, they maintain contact through coded messages and intermediary agents, forming networks that span continents and crystal spheres. Their activities range from information gathering and artifact recovery to assassination and ritual magic, each action carefully coordinated to advance Vecna's larger strategies. The spells granted to Vecna's clerics reflect his divine nature and priorities. They excel at divination magic, able to uncover secrets and perceive hidden truths with efficiency that exceeds most other divine casters. They command undead with authority that approaches or even surpasses dedicated necromancers. They can conceal information, create illusions, manipulate memories, and generally control the flow of knowledge in their environment. In combat, they favor spells that drain life force, corrupt living flesh, or summon undead servitors, turning the enemy's strength into weakness and death into advantage. Beyond his organized clergy, Vecna's influence extends through countless individuals who serve him without formal religious structure. Wizards who study from his texts, whether they know their origin or not, advance his understanding of magic. Rulers who employ methods he pioneered, governing through secrets and controlled information, strengthen his divine portfolio, even if they have never spoken his name in prayer. Anyone who hoards knowledge, who withholds information for personal advantage, who values secrets over transparency, performs acts that feed Vecna's divine essence. This diffuse influence makes Vecna extraordinarily difficult to oppose in any meaningful way. Fighting a god typically requires either direct confrontation, which risks annihilation, or systematic elimination of their worship base, denying them the belief that sustains divine consciousness. But how does one fight a god whose influence operates through the fundamental impulse to keep secrets? How does one eliminate worship of a deity who gains power from actions people perform without conscious religious intent? The answer, troubling to those who seek to contain or eliminate his influence, is that such opposition faces nearly insurmountable challenges. His divine power manifests across the multiverse in ways both subtle and overt. Avatars bearing his likeness can appear in moments of crisis or opportunity, physically manifesting to intervene in events that hold particular significance for his plans. These avatars possess only a fraction of his full divine might, but that fraction suffices to devastate armies or reshape the outcomes of critical confrontations. They appear as tall figures shrouded in tattered robes, their left eye socket empty and seeping darkness, their left hand missing at the wrist, visible reminders of the wounds inflicted by Ka's millennia ago. More commonly, Vecna influences events without direct manifestation, working through visions granted to his followers, through coincidences too convenient to be natural, through the sudden revelation of crucial information at precisely the right moment, based on documented accounts from those who claim to have encountered his influence. Reality itself seems to bend slightly around Vecna's interests, probability shifting to favor results that advance his agenda. His relationship with other gods remains complicated and contentious. Most divine beings view him with suspicion at best, outright hostility at worst. They recognize what he represents, a being who achieved godhood through ambition and dark magic, rather than ascending through more traditional means, whose very existence challenges the established order of divine hierarchy. Vecna cares nothing for the agreements and conventions that govern interactions between gods, viewing such rules as obstacles to be circumvented. rather than standards to be respected. Some gods actively oppose him, dedicating significant divine resources to containing his influence and frustrating his plans. Deities of knowledge who value truth over secrecy, gods of light who champion transparency, powers who govern death in ways that oppose undeath, all find themselves in regular conflict with Vecna and his followers. These conflicts rarely involve direct confrontation between the gods themselves, as such battles risk catastrophic collateral damage. Instead, they play out through mortal proxies, with clergy and followers of opposing deities engaging in shadow wars that span centuries and multiple worlds. Other gods maintain wary neutrality, neither supporting nor opposing Vecna directly, but watching him carefully for any sign that his activities might threaten their interests. They recognize his power and his ruthlessness, understanding that making an enemy of him carries serious risks. This tension creates a delicate balance, with various gods occasionally cooperating to limit Vecna's actions, while stopping short of the united opposition that might provoke him to desperate measures. The mortal world continues to feel Vecna's influence through phenomena that many do not recognize as connected to him. The steady proliferation of lichhood, the increasing sophistication of necromantic magic, the growing acceptance in some circles of undeath as a valid alternative to mortality, all reflect his corrupting presence. Academic institutions that once would have rejected necromancy as inherently evil now offer courses in its theory and application, influenced by texts that ultimately trace back to Vecna's teachings. His artifacts continue their journey through history, changing hands, corrupting bearers, spreading his influence one individual at a time. The hand and eye remain the most famous, but based on his millennia of magical research, it seems reasonable to assume Vecna has created numerous other artifacts over his long existence, each one serving as a vector for his will. Some appear as books containing dangerous knowledge. Others take the form of weapons or armor, empowering their wielders while slowly eroding their independence. The terror his name inspires remains one of his greatest weapons. Across countless worlds, in cultures that have never directly encountered him, Vecna exists as a figure of nightmare, the ultimate boogeyman used to frighten children and intimidate the gullible. But these fears are not baseless. They reflect an instinctive recognition that something about Vecna is fundamentally wrong, that his existence represents a violation of natural order, so profound that reality itself recoils. Speaking his name aloud, even in jest, can attract unwanted attention from his cult. This fear serves multiple purposes. It makes people reluctant to speak openly about Vecna or his followers, allowing his cult to operate with reduced opposition. It creates an atmosphere of helplessness, convincing potential enemies that fighting him is futile. And most importantly, it feeds his divine power, as fear is itself a form of acknowledgement, a recognition of power and significance that strengthens the being it focuses upon. Every frightened whisper, every cautionary tale, every moment of dread inspired by his name adds incrementally to his strength. Looking toward the future, Vecna's ambitions remain as vast and terrible as ever. His ascension to godhood was never an end goal, but merely another step in a journey that may have no ultimate destination. He continues to probe the boundaries of divine power, seeking ways to transcend the limitations imposed upon him during Die Vecna Die, working toward the absolute godhood that was denied him. His plans span millennia, each action calculated to advance goals that may not bear fruit for generations or centuries. Whatever his ultimate aims, one truth remains undeniable. Vecna is patient. He has existed for thousands of years and expects to exist for thousands more. A setback that might discourage other beings barely registers to him as more than a temporary inconvenience. A plan that requires centuries to unfold seems perfectly reasonable from his perspective. He can afford to move slowly, to build incrementally, to accept small victories that accumulate into overwhelming advantage over time. His enemies must maintain constant vigilance, must win every battle, must never falter or fail. He need only succeed once, in the right way at the right time, and his victory becomes permanent. The story of Vecna, from ambitious mortal wizard to godhood, represents a journey that rewrites the rules of what is possible. He proved that death itself can be overcome, that lichhood offers a viable path to immortality. He demonstrated that gods are not unreachable pinnacles, but states that can be achieved through sufficient power and planning. He showed that the multiverse itself can be challenged, its fundamental laws bent or broken by beings of sufficient will and knowledge. These lessons inspire some and terrify others, but they cannot be unlearned or forgotten. You have now walked the path from Vecna's mortal origins in the city of Fleeth, through his transformation into lichhood, witnessed his fragmentation and reformation after the betrayal by Kaz, understood his influence over necromantic traditions and the undead hierarchy, and seen his ultimate ascension to godhood through the events of Vecna Lives and Die Vecna Die. You have glimpsed the scope of his influence, the depth of his planning, the terrifying patience with which he pursues goals that may not manifest for millennia. You understand now that Vecna is not merely a powerful undead being, or even simply a dark god. He is an idea given form, the embodiment of the principle that power justifies itself, that knowledge is worth any price, and that the only true limitation is lack of ambition. The Whispered One remains active across the multiverse, his consciousness distributed through divine power that extends across multiple planes simultaneously. His cult continues to grow, recruiting new members with promises of power and secret knowledge. His influence spreads through the proliferation of necromantic magic and the normalization of undeath in societies that once would have rejected it. And somewhere, in divine realms beyond mortal perception, Vecna himself plans and schemes, working toward goals that may reshape reality itself. So the next time you encounter a mysterious text promising forbidden knowledge, or meet a stranger offering power beyond your current station, or feel the inexplicable urge to conceal information that might be better shared, remember this: Vecna's grasp extends farther than you imagine. His influence operates more subtly than you suspect, and his patience outlasts any mortal opposition. The Lich King's last stand was not an ending, but a transformation, and his undying grasp continues to tighten around the throat of reality itself. If you found this deep dive into Vecna's journey from mortal to God fascinating, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more explorations of the darkest corners of Dungeons and Dragons lore. Your support helps us continue uncovering the secrets and stories that make this multiverse so endlessly compelling. Until next time, may your dice roll true and your secrets remain your own.